네, 안녕하십니까.
Hello everyone. Thank you for participating in the 15th International Seafood Trade Forum, online and offline, despite your busy schedule. I am Haejin Park, senior researcher from Korea Maritime Institute, who will be an MC for today's event. In this forum marks 15th anniversary, and this is for the building the networking between the fishery exporters. Last years we had the hybrid forum, and this year again we are holding this event in hybrid way. Today we will discuss the seeking strategies for responding to seafood exporters amid changes in the global trade environment and accelerating supply chain reorganizations. We have experts from Korea and Italy, Singapore, and Norway. We'll look forward to have a meaningful discussions on how rapid changes in the global trade environment are affecting the global seafood supply chain. Let me introduce today's participants. International speakers are connected online, and I will introduce them via screen. First, let me introduce Jo Jung-hee, Vice President of the KMI. Next, we have the speakers for the topic presentation. We have Mr. Matthew Tan, the co-chair of PPFS from APEC. Next, we have Mr. Marcio Castro de Souza, the FAO Senior Fishery Industry Officer. We also have Mr. Lee Sang-gun, the Director of K-Fish Information Center of KMI. I think he is not present for a while. Then let me move on to Mr. Gilt Hoekstra, the economic researchers from the Wageningen University. And we also have the moderator for the discussion session, Mr. Chung Myung-seng, the chairman of ISTF. We also have Kim Sung-hee, the Director of Export and Processing Promotion Division from the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. We have Mr. Kim Ho-dong, the Deputy President of the Export Department of Korea Fishery Trade Association. Next, we have Mr. Johan Kvalheim, Director of the Norwegian Seafood Council. We have Mr. Anton from Patanapak, the Professor of Bangkok University. We also have Professor Bong-tae Kim from the Bukyong National University. He is not present yet. Next, I will move on to Mr. Young-chan Kim, the CEO of Bounty Farm. Let me thank all the participants on and offline, and welcome all of you to the 15th International Seafood Trade Forum. So today, on behalf of the Jong Kim, the president of KMI, the vice president Chung Mi-jo will deliver the opening speech. Please welcome her with a big round of applause. Hello everyone. I am Chung Mi-jo, the vice president of KMI. The Jong Kim, the president, was supposed to be here, but due to his busy schedule, I'm reading on behalf of him. My thanks goes to Kim Sung-hee, the director of the MOF, who delivered the congratulatory remarks, and also to Mr. Matthew Tan, the head of the APEC FSPP, and Mr. Marcio Castro, the senior fisheries officer of the FAO, and Mr. Lee Sang-gun from the KMI, and Mr. Gilt Hoekstra from the Wageningen University. And I also thank all the discussants. And I'd like to thank Mr. Chung Myung-seng, who will be the moderator for the panel discussion. And also today's event will be held online and offline, so I'd like to thank all the participants for your participation. With the recent changes in the global trade environment and reshaping of global supply chains, the trade in fisheries products is facing turning point. Along with geopolitical changes, the global trade environment witnesses protectionism and US-China decoupling. In addition, the global supply chain is undergoing structural changes such as fourth industrial revolution and climate change and the transfer of the production base. These changes in the trade environment and supply chain are expected to impact the seafood trade significantly. Accordingly, the 15th International Seafood Trade Forum to be held today would like to invite experts to discuss changes of export environment resulted from evolving trade climate and reformation of the supply chain and find way to cooperate for the fisheries trade.
오늘 포럼을 개최하는 데 있어서 도움을 주신 관계자
I would like
여러분과
to thank all the staff for your hard work to make this event possible and thank participants for your
참석해주신
presence.
여러분들의 지혜가 모아
I hope that
변화하고
we can pull our
교육적인
wisdom together
대응을
so that we can
나아갈
respond to this
용기 있는
evolving environment, and I
강의를
hope this event can be a
그리고
meaningful platform.
내년에는
I
더욱더
hope
많은
to
분들을
see you
방문가의 자리로
more and
대면으로
communicate
뵙고 소통할 수
with more
있는
people next
기회가
year.
되기를 간절히 기원합니다. 이것으로서
With that,
간담회 개최를 마치도록 하겠습니다.
I will conclude my opening speech. Thank you very much.
네, 좋은 말씀 Thank you so much for your remark. Now I'm going to invite Song-hee Kim, Director of Export and Processing Promotion Division at Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. He's here on behalf of the Director General Kyung-gyu Lee of Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries.
예, 안녕.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Song-hee Kim, Director of Export and Processing Promotion Division at Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on the opening of the 15th International Seafood Trade Forum. The International Seafood Trade Forum has established a worldwide network of seafood trade on a variety of topics each year, and we are very pleased that it has established itself as an international event that contributes to the expansion of seafood exports. I'd like to express my gratitude to the presenters, panelists, and distinguished guests from home and abroad who participated in this meaningful event today as well. I'd like to also express my gratitude to all the officials of the Korea Maritime Institute, who are preparing for the International Seafood Trade Forum every year. With a global supply chain shock triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic, the world is experiencing an unprecedented supply chain crisis, and the global environment is changing rapidly. Global seafood trade cannot escape this impact either, and we are experiencing a period of coexistence of opportunities and crises. This timely event on the theme of seeking a strategy for responding to seafood exporters amid changes in the global trade environment and accelerating supply chain reorganization will be a valuable opportunity for fisheries professionals around the world to gather diverse views on keywords such as digital transformation, carbon neutrality, seafood supply chain reshaping, and sustainable development. In the future, I'd like to thank everyone who participated in today's event and ask you to provide a platform for the International Seafood Trade Forum on which the worldwide seafood trade network can be established and promote the qualitative growth of the country's seafood trade. Thank you so much.
Thank you, both of you, for your wonderful speeches. Then, before moving on to the main session, we will have a group photo session. So all the speakers and discussants, please come forward to the podium so that we can have a group photo.
발표 시작에 앞서
So before going on to the main session, I will let you know we have a simultaneous interpretation for today's event, and it will be broadcast on both language, in English and in Korea. And you can also leave any questions on the YouTube chat room. So through the raffles, we will provide a gift for the people who participate in the event. Then we will talk about the strategies for the seafood supply chain and exports. And first presentation will be made by, under the title of the Sustainable Development Direction of Seafood Supply Chain in the Era of the Food Security, Mr. Matthew Tan will deliver his presentation.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, speakers, esteemed colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, please allow me to congratulate the Korean Marine Institute, the organizer of today's forum, the 15th International Seafood Trade Forum, for putting together this very timely forum. The theme for this year's forum is Strategies for Responding to Changes in the Global Trade Environment and Accelerated Supply Chain Reorganization of Seafood. Indeed, we must transform our fishery practice to tackle challenges from the evolving ongoing trend where demand is ever growing and changing, and evolving demographics, an extremely fragile and volatile environment. Seafood demand is increasing, and we are seeing a trend now leaning towards plant-based alternative protein and land-based intensive aquaculture production. Our fishery industry is also hindered by the shortage of manpower and unpredictable weather conditions. We are expecting the Earth operating environment to undergo major transformation, and hence it's important to put meaning to the new aspect that the seafood industry will go through in our forum today. In my speech today, I will be sharing on what I see essentially as the next sustainable fishery trend and its impact on global food security. About APEC. APEC is a regional forum established in 1989, and it leveraged on the growing interdependence of the Asia-Pacific region. APEC 21 members economies aim to create greater prosperity for the people of the region by promoting balanced, inclusive, sustainable, innovative, and secure growth, and by accelerating regional integration and food security has become an increasing concern and priority. Now, one of APEC PPF's key operating parameters is the recognition of the importance of public-private partnership, PPP. We believe that food security can be optimally achieved when the public and private sector comes together in unison and in partnership. No two ways about it. And this will also form the overarching principle behind my presentation today. World Food Crisis in 2050. You would have probably seen this tagline many times, but the question that begs the reality today is, how serious is this crisis? The COVID-19 pandemic and the current Ukraine and Russian conflicts has grossly exposed the gaps and weaknesses of our food supply chain, and the realization now comes for the need to move into localized food production, harvesting, processing, and long-term storage. We are now faced with both demand and supply of food security challenges. Now, on the demand side, APEC economies must deal with a global population that will reach an estimate 9.6 billion in 2050, in which we will need an estimated 70% more food and 40% more land if we are to meet this demand based on current production cycle. Now, coupled with a recent finding by World Wildlife Federation, we forecasted that there will be no more fish left to eat by 2048 if the world continue fishing at its current pace. Wow! This is a double whammy, and for your information, you may want to know that APEC economies account for 80% of global aquaculture production and more than 65% of the world captured fishery. The driving force behind seafood production and consumption is the global economy. Simply said, ever-increasing demand and shortage of supply. Global fishery production is heavily dependent on our natural environment and its resources such as the sea and the God-given aquatic animals such as fish, shellfish, crustaceans, seaweed, and etc. But the question is, how long will these natural resources last? If I may submit to you this afternoon, our ocean today is suffering from the consequences of economic and social progress over the last 100 years in the form of environmental degradation that is endangering the very system which our system and development and our very survival depends on. Now, this is a sustainable future that we want to build. We can try to cut down on consumption, but can we produce more and better with less? More importantly, we need to decouple economic growth from further causing further environmental degradation to our beloved ocean, and this can be possible via a teaming agreement between the fishery and the aquaculture industry under the umbrella of PPP, Private-Public Partnership. Now, before we dive deeper into the crisis that is looming before us, I think it is important that we have an understanding of the background and major causes to current food and shortages and also future food shortages. Let me show you some examples of environmental degradation that our poor Earth has undergone the past 100 years. Our polar ice caps are melting at an alarming fast rate. In short, the permafrost is thawing, and this is turning the Arctic tundra into a major source of greenhouse emission, as well as soil microbe converting carbons into carbon dioxide and methane. The release of methane from the deteriorating permafrost will feed the thawing cycle, resulting in higher temperatures,
อย่างนี้ลำบาก
scientists coin as global warming. Do you know for a fact that our ocean has been absorbing most of the heat trapped by greenhouse emission in the atmosphere for the past 100 years, resulting in a warmer ocean? 93% of the additional heat in the climate goes to the ocean. In a NOAA fishery-funded study, it is found that many fish in some coastal areas are projected to migrate towards the North Pole and South Pole into the deeper and cooler water. A separate study released by the National Academy of Science report that total mass of sea animals is projected to drop by 5% for every 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit of ocean warming. Recently, I was in touch with a tuna fishery company in Asia, and they told me that their tuna catch has dropped by almost 90%. Not because there's no more tuna in the fishing ground, but the fish finder indicates that the tuna are now diving deeper than what their current fishery equipment could manage. Yes, our wild fishing stock in our ocean has been on the move towards the northward migration pathway. Fish only has a 2 degrees thermal tolerance, and anything higher than that, they will dive deeper and commence migration to cooler water. Look at this chart. The areas shaded in red are expected to have the greatest increase in fish population by the year 2050. This study actually predicts that large number of marine species will start migrating from tropical sea towards cooler water, specifically to the Arctic and the Southern Ocean, at an average rate of 40 to 45 kilometers per decade, leaving numerous extinction of marine species in tropical water. Salmon disaster in Chile. This is as a result of environmental degradation. Persistent algae bloom is almost becoming a norm in this industry. The salmon industry is particularly hard hit by massive mortality whenever they are hit by algae bloom, which bring dissolved oxygen level to zero. Salmon disaster in Norway, and Norway is currently the world #1 producer of farmed salmon. Algae bloom in the Straits of Johor, which has led to massive fish kill. Can you see the effect of the environmental degradation? Persistent algae bloom. There seems to be no end to this chronological event, which I've been documenting for the past numbers of years. According to a recent UN report, more harmful algae bloom are expected from these activities. This is the year 2020. It is the hottest year ever recorded in the history of Earth. Let's look at some factual report this afternoon that I've captured for our presentation here today. July 2021, just last year, the hottest month ever recorded in the history of Earth. Report number 1, this is from the World Economic Forum. 60% of the world fish species are now at the risk of extinction due to climate change. Do you know for a fact that if the average global temperature rises by 5 degrees Celsius, 2/3 of the global fish species will be eradicated by the year 2100? Report number 2, Channel News Asia. In some countries like Malaysia, changing weather patterns have negatively impacted fishery operating costs and potential of a good catch. More reports for you. Earth Journalism Network. More unpredictable weather pattern and its impact on fishermen catch, driving the industry into what I call choppy waters. The Sun Daily. This is just June 2022. Unpredictable weather in Malaysia has affected fish landing, causing a reduction in the supply of raw material. The New York Times. Fish populations are declining as the ocean warms. Do you know for a fact that 1.4 million metric tons of fish has disappeared from our ocean from the year 1930 to the year 2010? This is an interesting slide. This is abalone farming in China. Now, this is my ex-company. I have served in this company for 7 years as a chief technology officer, and it's the largest abalone company. We operate in temperatures between 18 to 22. When I first joined the company, during the summer month, it can hit a high of 25, 25.5, 26. And when that happens, the abalone will start to die. But do you know, in the week of October 2022, just last month, in the week of 18 October, the peak temperature hit 30 degrees. It has never happened before in this farming region in the south of China. Look at this chart. This is a forecast by the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration in the US on future agricultural production by the year 2050 in the light of current global warming. Now, it certainly doesn't look like it's going to get any cooler in the near future, nor is our production numbers looking to pick up soon. In fact, it is forecasted that due to global warming, the agricultural production will drop to a minus 50 by the year 2050. Now, in the light, I've seen you showing so many reports this afternoon. In the light of degrading environmental conditions, I must tell you, it's not looking bright for the fisheries industries. So the question that begs at this reality check is, what is the future for the blue economy, which is our ocean? How do we decouple economic growth from environmental degradation and wild captured fishery is on the sunset path? I believe this current COVID crisis is an opportunity for a profound systemic shift to a more sustainable blue economy that works for both the people and the earth. The emergence of COVID-19 and the current conflicts has underscored the relationship between people and nature, and its glaring facts will remain. Humans have unlimited needs, but our ocean has limited capacity. There is a limit to which humans can push nature before the impact turns negative. We must change our seafood harvesting and production methodology. We need to use technology to increase current productivity by using lesser sustainable resources, lesser pollution, moving towards carbon neutrality, and be part of the circular economy. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings me to the crux of my message for today. We are now in the midst of entering the new era where there are new emerging trends in the fishery and aquaculture industry. In this era, it's been forecasted that robots will take over more than 5 million jobs in the next 5 years. Fisheries industry, if they do not upgrade the operation and their skill sets, they will be competing with machines and robots and possibly left behind. You will also begin to see an acceleration in innovation and the use of technology, major disruption via the use of technology, using less to produce more and in a more sustainable manner. The blue economy needs to move what I call as a regenerative and restorative aquaculture. Do you know that fishing has also affected the ecological processes of the ocean at a very large scale? Overfishing transformed a very stable, matured, efficient ecosystem into one that's immature and stressed. This happened in various ways. Example, when you target and you reduce the abundance of high-value predator fish, you will deeply modify the trophic change and the flow of biomass across the whole entire ocean ecosystem. It also disturbed the other habitats, and notably by destroying bottom topography and associated habitats such as the seagrass, algae bed, coral reef, and the benthic community. Now, if you look at this picture, this is what the ocean looked like 100 years ago when there is a multi-trophic relationship with the fish, the seaweed, the algae, the shellfish, the crustaceans, the bottom feeders such as sea cucumber, together with seagrass and seaweed, which are absolutely necessary for biodigestion of organic waste such as ammonia and phosphate. But sadly, besides ocean warming, our ocean today are highly depleted of such bottom feeders and aquatic plant, which partially resulted in the massive eutrophication, algae bloom, which you have seen in my earlier on slide. Studies have shown that indeed restorative aquaculture can reverse this trend and will have a positive impact on marine life. This photo in this slide has just been taken recently in the Straits of Johor, where there is a pioneer restorative aquaculture initiative taking place here in Singapore. It will be a complete multi-trophic farming system, and I hope to bring you good news on its progress on the near future. So, what does it take to restore the blue economy? I have a proposed strategy for you today, which I believe can lead us to restoring our blue economy, our ocean, at the same time securing our future generation food security goal. Yes, a partnership between our fishery industry and the aquaculture industry, and supported by the public sector. Now, this is a strategy to restock the ocean. Now, before you cast any stone at my proposal today, can I ask you to listen to my entire proposition before you decide to discount it? I know the topic of restocking the ocean has surfaced many years back. It's failed miserably. However, with the involvement and advancement of technologies today, and I can tell you, that it is possible. So please bear with me for a few more minutes. Now, in the past 10 years or so, the aquaculture industry has made tremendous progress in the use of technology for breeding of fish. Survival of fish larvae are now at all-time high, resulting in very low cost of fingerling production. More predictable cycle for production of fish eggs. With the breakthrough in spawning and hatchery techniques, we can now restock the ocean with the excess capacity that we have. But we need the public sector assistance to set aside marine reserves, which are strictly no fishing during the restocking and the incubation period. Look at this chart. I compartmentalize the role of the two proposed parties. Fishery industry to provide necessary wild-caught endemic broodstock, partial divestment of their resources into the aquaculture industry. And the aquaculture industry be responsible for the development and the production of excess fingerling to be released back to the ocean. And finally, this effort must be supported by the public sector in the setup of our reserve marine sanctuary. Remember the APEC concept of PPP. Finally, before I conclude my presentation this afternoon, I just want to briefly share with you a new sunrise industry that's taking place in the aquaculture industry in the form of smart urban farm. So what is smart urban farm? Smart urban farm will be a small farms, that you're going to see rising up in small footprint, super intensive in fish production, and found in urban setting. And I call this the COVID effect. Do you know that the COVID-19 pandemic has spelled a death sentence to many aquaculture farms that traditionally clustered together? As a result of the pandemic lockdown, many fish were left to die in the pond because simply there was no worker to harvest it. Now, this smart farm will usually be located in an urban setting where fish do not have to travel 1,000 of kilometers like in the US. The aquaculture industry is moving towards a carbon neutral and 365 farming capability. Take a look at this slide. Previously, in the old farms, in 1 hectare, we can only produce 34,000 kilo of fish. Today, with the new technology, in 1 hectare, we can produce 2 million kilogram of fish. Energy efficiency. Previously, we used to take 25 to 30 kilowatt to produce 1 kg of fish. Today, you only need 1.5 kilowatt. Let me just show you what a current smart farm will look like in this video. This is the automated harvesting technique. We don't need workers to harvest the fish anymore. Now, isn't it amazing? Such a small farm occupying only 0.2 hectare and producing a staggering 400,000 kilogram of fish annually as compared to 34,000 in 1 hectare of space. Now, more importantly, this farm is only operated by 1 man and 0 antibiotics. Fisheries and aquaculture is more than just a movement today. It will be a much smarter approach to help the fisheries and the aquaculture sector to predict what will be the next big trend and facing the industry. Now, in closing, I would like to pen the following for your thoughts. Sustainable fishery is like healthy bank account. Live off the interest, don't deplete the principal. We need to start considering how to top up the ocean if we want a sustainable future. Sustainable fishery has a direct impact on future supply chain of our seafood, and it will affect our global food security goals too. I hope my presentation today will start to spur your thinking caps. As mentioned in my earlier slides, one of APAC PPFS key operating parameters is public-private partnership. And I believe that a major key towards sustainable fishery and global food security can start today between the fishery and aquaculture industry. And of course, it must be supported by the public sector. In my next trip to Korea, I hope to see a concerted effort to rebuild and restore the natural resources in our beautiful ocean. Thank you.
네, 지속 가능한 수산업 발전 방향에 대해서 좋은 말씀해 주신 매튜탄 대표님 감사합니다. 이어서 코로나19 이후 세계 수산물 공급망의 현재와 미래를
Now I'm going to introduce you the next speaker. The next speaker will tell us about the present and future of the global fish supply chain after COVID-19. This will be delivered by Marcio Castro de Souza from FAO.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for the Korean Maritime Institute to invite FAO to be present at this event. Personally, I think it's my third or fourth event of the Korea Maritime Institute that I attend, and they are also in very good quality in terms of the debates and presentations. My idea here is going to present a little bit of the global picture of the fisheries and aquaculture sector, but I'm going to frame it in a different way. The way that I'm going to frame it is that to explain a little bit why we had some sort of effects during the pandemic that are closely linked to the basic characteristics of the fisheries and aquaculture sector at a global level. So let me share my presentation now and start showing to you this different approach. So the idea here, as I mentioned, is to show a little bit what's the general picture of the global and aquaculture sector. And I'm going to start by highlighting maybe some 4 base characteristics that are directly linked with the effects that we had during the pandemic. But I'm not talking specifically about the pandemic now. The idea is that those 4 characteristics, they are critical in terms of how the fisheries and aquaculture sector reacts to any change in the global scenario. So those are very intrinsic characteristics that some of them are specifically to our sector. So those are basically the 4 ones that we want to highlight. It's one of the only animal proteins that can come from completely 2 different sources, as Professor Tan mentioned before, the issue of aquaculture. In many other sectors, we do not have that. Many animal protein sectors, I mean. So, and that poses challenges, but also poses opportunities for us. We have seen that during the pandemic, and I'm going to show that later, aquaculture and white capture, they face completely different characteristics in terms of the effects that they faced during the pandemic. A second strong characteristic of the fisheries and aquaculture sector is a significant production share of developing countries. Most of the global production comes from developing countries. We have a very significant importance of international trade. That's the third characteristics. And we do have very long value chains in fisheries and aquaculture sector. Sometimes a product, as Professor Tan mentioned, in terms of the aquaculture production, sometimes product is produced in one country, processed in another, and consumed in the third one. So we have very long value chains. And so I'm going to elaborate a little bit further on those 4 characteristics and try to align the challenges and opportunities that they bring for a moment of crisis like the pandemic. When you look at the fisheries and aquaculture production and sustainability at a global level, we can see clearly that for many long time, fisheries was the major source of fish supply at a global level. That's the bluish area of this graph. Since the 90s, aquaculture became expanding as a global supply, a global important supply in terms of the fish that we consume. And nowadays it's more or less 50-50. We produce and 50% of wild capture fisheries and 50% coming from aquaculture. And why is that? One of the reasons, because if you, just going back to the previous graph, if you see the blue line, so the fish coming from wild capture, the production is more or less stable over the years. There are small fluctuations around that. And one of the reasons of this stability is exactly the issue of sustainability. If you look at the orange area of this graph, you see clearly that the percentage, the share of overfished stocks is slightly increasing over the years. And the area, the bluish area, that's the sum of the dark blue and the light blue, which is the sustainable area of the global stocks, are relatively stable. Are also decreasing, sorry. So we have an increase in overfish stocks at the global level. However, we have good news for that in terms of the sustainability. Although the global picture of overfish stocks is increasing, you can see at the right corner the percentage of commercial landed stocks are in a very good situation, more than 80%. So, and that's a clear result of good fisheries management in many countries. And that's also one of the reasons that we see that although the global picture is not so good in terms of the global level, but we have some very good regional results in terms of sustainability and fisheries management results. This graph shows the FAO fishing areas, and you can see clearly that the blue area shows the sustainable stocks, and you can see some of them performing quite well in some specific regions of the world. So that shows also the importance of good sustainable, of good management in terms of a national level that can target commercial stocks in a sustainable way and reduce the percentage of overfish stocks. And I mentioned at the big graph between aquaculture and white capture that white capture is relatively stable in the last years, and aquaculture is increasing. And this trend is going to continue. Aquaculture is indeed continue to increase in the next years, and it's already surpassing white capture fisheries for human consumption. So one important issue is that, and we have seen many reports mentioning this, when you talk about food security, when you talk about the increased population growth in the world, aquaculture can indeed be the answer in terms of having an animal protein to feed this increased population growth. Fisheries and aquaculture is not only important, is important in all three pillars of sustainability, in the environmental, in economic, and social terms. And I'm going to mention some brief numbers just to show the importance of social and economic terms. If we look at the processing phase of the value chain of fisheries and aquaculture product, 50% of the employment in that area is women, which is a quite gender inclusive activity. In addition to that, in economic terms, we have more than $4 billion in terms of the total first sale value, with aquaculture contributing with more than 50% of that value. Almost 2/3 of that value is devoted from aquaculture. And one of the four components that I mentioned that causes challenges and opportunities for moment of crisis like the pandemic is the issue that fisheries and aquaculture is a true international commodity. International trade is very important for fisheries and aquaculture products. I originally, 20 years ago, I came from the agriculture sector, and when I was starting working with fisheries and aquaculture, I came up with these numbers, and I was quite astonished by that. When we realize, and that's not a particular year number, that's a constant number over the years. When you look at the global exports of animal proteins in value terms, fish and aquaculture products is more than the sum of global exports in value terms of beef, pork, and poultry combined. So we are talking about the animal protein that has the highest share of international trade in value terms. And 37% of the fish production enters international markets. Also, we have an inclusive participation of countries. it's very common, and it's completely different from other animal proteins, that many producers, the major producers of fisheries and aquaculture products, in many occasions, they are also major importers of fisheries and aquaculture products. And that creates a natural tendency for international trade. Why we have that? One of the reasons, for example, we have here China, Russia, US, Japan, Norway, that's are the big producers. But if you look at China, US, Russia, Japan, they are also big importers. Why is that? Because we have such a, one of the reasons is that we have such a variety of species in terms of fisheries and aquaculture products that is almost impossible for any country to state that they are self-sufficient in fisheries and aquaculture production. There is always going to have a specific fish species that's not naturally produced, and that creates an intensive flow of international trade of fisheries and aquaculture products. But of course, that also poses challenges. When you have developing countries as the major suppliers of fisheries and aquaculture products, we are also dependent on transportation issues. We also dependent on how developing countries are going to approach what's going to be their reaction to different issues regarding crises that they might face. We are facing a lot of increased demand of developing countries. So what's going to be the behavior of those exports from developing countries to the international markets when the national demand is increasing? When you look also at the major exporters, you see, as I mentioned, some of them are big producers like China, Norway, Vietnam, Chile, and here we have a diversity of both aquaculture and white capture fisheries, like Norway, Vietnam, and with Vietnam with pangasius and shrimp, Thailand with tuna and shrimp, Ecuador with tuna and shrimp. So there is a variety of both coming from aquaculture and white capture fisheries. And when we look at the major importers, as I mentioned, some of them are also big producers, like the US, like China, like Japan, like here in Europe, Spain, France, Italy. They are, and you can see Korea here, as major importers in the global scenario. When you look at the importance of international trade in fisheries and aquaculture, in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, of course, we also have some problems with that. We rely a lot of transportation, particularly because of the long value chain that I mentioned, and I'm going to get into more details later. We have the increased number of non-tariff barriers affecting the fisheries and aquaculture sector. There is a United Nations study that fisheries faces more non-tariff barriers than industrial products in general in the world. And that was particularly seen during the pandemic, where many countries imposed barriers in terms of the packaging of fisheries and aquaculture products due to the concerns about the COVID spread. We have operational challenges that are associated with international trade. During the pandemic, we have many problems with crew on board of the vessels that in most of the cases, the crew on board fishing vessels, they are quite international, and they are not allowed to, for example, to disembark in international ports of the flag of the vessel that they are fishing into because of issues regarding restrictions of movement of people during the pandemic. When you look at the major trade species at a global level, we have basically three groups of major species that are the most important one, each represented one subgroup. So for the finfish, we have salmon and trouts as the main representative with 18%. With crustaceans, we have shrimps and prawns with 16%. And with mollusks, we have squids with 7%. So those three groups are the major drivers in terms of the supply of products. But of course, tuna, cods, and other crustaceans are most important. In the area of finfish, we have many small pelagics that are quite important too in terms of international trade. I mentioned the issue of long value chains, and I'm going to present here a very synthetic value chain graph just to show how different situations can affect different scenarios. And of course, it's going also to depend if we are talking about aquaculture or white capture. So we have problems in terms of the availability of personnel, as Professor Tan mentioned during the pandemic for aquaculture. Sometimes there is a lot of products already produced in the aquaculture farms with no possibility of transportation, no possibility of selling those. Sometimes we have shortage of labor for harvesting those products. We have distribution problems, we have consumption. So those, as I mentioned, it's a very synthetic way of presenting the value chain, but the idea is to show that it's a complex value chain. This is a very simplified one. In addition to the complexity, we have more two features. Coming from white capture and aquaculture can change dramatically what's the most important point of the value chain, and also that value chain can be quite internationally in terms of the segment. So I'm going to basically build up some of the elements that FAO has collected during the pandemic that, for example, for short production cycles like shrimp in aquaculture, it was easier for many producers to adapt in terms of distribution of the production. During the pandemic also, the labor of some aquaculture production, since they are neighboring sources, it was easier for not to disrupt the production. But of course, for the products that have been already started, the production cycle, there is no control of what is already being produced. In the fisheries, many of the most important challenges are completely different. It's completely port operational dependent. As I mentioned, the problem of the crew. The labor is usually outsourced in different countries. They stay on board for different specific period of time. And the main production cost is fuel. And that also poses a problem because we saw that recently, although the situation has changed a little bit, but we have seen some fuel costs increase and also the transportation cost increasing, as we are going to see now in the graph. So we have many market disruptions recently in the fisheries and aquaculture industry. The COVID one was up then. The freight costs about 6 months ago, now the situation is becoming a little bit more stable, and also changes in consumer preferences. And that has a lot to do with the pandemic. We have seen the e-sales booming during the pandemic, new packaging exploding in terms of new technology applied to the pandemic. But also during the pandemic, what we have seen is something that is quite important, is the issue of exploring since there was a disruption of this long value chain, some producers starting exploring new buyers, new consumer for their products. And this exploration led to adding new consumers and new buyers to a traditional value chain that has been set. And that's more or less what I'm saying now in this graph, this slide. So of course, in the production of aquaculture, shrimp can be easier to adapt. We have alternative markets being explored. And one thing that's quite important, after the peak of the pandemic, what we are seeing now is that there is an additional of those new markets in the traditional ones. They have not been substituted by the markets. They are adding more buyers to the sector. Of course, the demand of healthier food in general in the world, the role of millennials and the Generation X is shaping considerably the pattern of fish consumption. The home cooking pattern during the pandemic has definitely also changed the way that the products are being sold, and including also the HoReCa, the hotel, restaurants, and catering, and the final consumers. Their HoReCa was basically completely stopped during the pandemic. But now what we have seen is that some of the products, some of the high value products that in the past was concentrated to the HoReCa section, they became available to consumers during the peak of the pandemic. And now we have seen those two areas working together. So we have seen the HoReCa with high-value products, and also final consumers with high-value, consuming high-value products. Just to finalize my presentation, I just would like to mention that FAO has a lot of information material that can support business and governments in terms of market assessment and initial assessment. We have what we call goldfish market profile for all countries. This is an example of China that shows the major products, major export products, major import products. We have also price dashboards for the major European species and a lot of all other resources in terms of market analysis for European, for China, and for global markets. So thank you again for the Korea Maritime Institute for this invitation. It was a great pleasure for FAO to give this presentation. Thank you all.
네, 코로나19
Thank you. Mr. Marcio gave the wonderful presentation about the present and future of the global fish supply chain after COVID-19. And third presentation will be made by Mr. Lee Sang-gun under the title of the New Export Strategy Direction. Thank you for your wonderful introduction. I am Sang-gun Lee from the KMI. I'm the director of K-Fish Information Center. Due to the COVID-19, I've been giving a presentation just online, but I'm so nervous. I see you and I stand before you in person. We also had a lot of changes in the fisheries. So today I will talk about the new export strategy following the reorganization of the seafood supply chain of South Korea. This is the contents of my presentation. First, I will talk about the change in the trade environment, and then I will see the analysis of seafood trade in Korea, and next I will talk about the new port strategy direction. First is about trade environment. The WTO and Mega FTA can be a good example. I can go back to this topic in detail again later, but important thing is that these FTA is take a lot in the Korea exports. It's around 70%. We have 18 FTAs with 50 countries, so the tariff will be the difficult to become the engine for the export. So CPTPP and IPF, the labor and the environment should have another options to go for us. First, let me talk about the multilateral negotiations. So far, we talked about the systems and rules, and we will have a discussion about digital institutions and environment. And this May, in the IPEF, we talked about special resolution process, environmental impact assessment, and marine waste, circular economy, and carbon reduction. These are actually affecting the RTAs and the U.S. unilateral sanctions. The regulation of the operation of the fisheries subsidies in the environment chapter created the healthy and the trading environment. And the U.S. Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act led to prohibit the import of the products produced in the Xinjiang Uyghur under the forced labor. The prohibition of the subsidies and the IUU fisheries and overfishing fisheries for these fisheries, the subsidies are prohibited. So we need to develop export item. However, we have to develop the more aquaculture sectors to find the more species which is fitting for the aquaculture. Also, we see the customers' requirements increasing. The Russian economic sanctions prohibit the import of the Russian fisheries products. So the consumer organization request this kind of ban on the import of the Russian fishery products. And due to the change in the awareness, the high added value fisheries are required more and more. So we need the more certification like MSC and the ASC certification. And also the US is recommending the large planted aquaculture and landfill sites for going for carbon neutral. And also, there is a management system that prevents IUU fisheries from entering the market. Especially noteworthy is that EU, Japan, and the US has the same trend. In order to export to the EU, we need the catch certificate for all fish species. And when exporting seafood to the US, the 13 fish species, including the abalone, blue crab, and the tuna, we need to provide the registered information on catch certification. So also for the 4 items including the squid, tuna, mackerel, and sardine, we need to provide a catch certificate for the export to Japan. Japan expects to scale up this catch certificate beyond these 4 species. So for Korea to export the items, we need to have a proper certificate. Next is about the COVID-19. When COVID-19 broke up, it affected a lot into the Korean export. So the export decreased by 200 million for 2 years. However, due to the government's effort, we could recover this. However, the effect due to the COVID-19 brought the increase in online transactions and diversification of HMR. It also happened in the exports. As I told you before, from 2.3 billion in 2000, and it can be recovered up to the 2.8 billion in 2020. I think that was the possible thanks to the effort of the government. We also had a Ukraine war. EU and the US had a ban on the Russia's fisheries, and the US and the EU saw the hike in the price of the fisheries by 10%. However, due to this situation, we had the big volatility in oil prices and the energies and the grain. And it gives a negative effect in the export. So this is the diagram, conceptual diagram, to show the impact on the seafood trade due to the changes in the global environments. So all the situation affect each of the elements, and again it led to the impact into the other various area. So for this, we need a comprehensive countermeasure is required. Then how the seafood trade in Korea turned out due to this kind of impact. This is the World Seafood Network. These are the countries who are doing the seafood trade, we all have the total 225 countries. So you can see the colors here: Norway, Vietnam, and Korea. These red colors are doing the very important roles in the seafood network. So this network consists of the 226, and the connection is almost more than 5,000. The European continent and the Asian continent has a close relationship. US and China has the largest impact in terms of the every elements. And for countries, each continent, we can see the China, Vietnam, India, and Hong Kong in the Asia, and also the Spain and France in the US. So Korea is the eighth largest importer and the 23rd largest export. This portion is growing continuously, so I believe that Korea will take a more important role in this network, especially the network relationship is very close between the Asian countries and the EU countries, and Oceania and Latin America has a strong relationship with Korea. So, in order for Korea to become the central position, we need to have the close relationship with the ocean, Ocean, the South America oceans. And this is the structure of the trade in the world. The global fisheries trade is amount to 363.4 billion. And we can see the major exporters like China, Norway, and Vietnam. And you can see the Norway, which is an advanced country, and the Norway is the second largest export country thanks to their advanced technologies. They grew the salmon, so that's how they could take the second largest exporter's position here. So for Korea to become this kind of a large exporter, we need to find out the strategic countermeasures. Next is the importers. You can see the USA, China, and Japan and Spain. Most of them are the advanced countries. So the imports are done mostly by the advanced countries. So that's why Korea has to targeting the advanced country for its export. And we also have to pay attention to the emerging countries. You can see Korea here. Korea is a 23rd exporting country. So if we include the seaweed, maybe Korea will take around the 15th in terms of the export. Next is the seafood export of Korea. In 2021, it was 2.83 billion, but it increased up to 3 billion in 2022. However, due to the active effort of the government, so we could recover relatively quicker than others. We have expectation that we will reach to 3 billion in 2022. So comparing 2020 and 2010 and 2021, we can see the decreased export to Japan. That is due to the decreased consumption in the domestic Japanese market. And the export market grew the 7 times bigger from the 2010 to 2021 thanks to the superstar species. Next is about the species exporting items. If you look at left graph, that's the trends in the number of seafood exporting countries and share of the top 3 countries. The number of the seafood exporting countries increased up to the 154, and also the share of the labor in the the share of the top 3 countries also increased. However, these 3 countries are taking almost 60% of the total export. So recently we have a high volatility, so we have to diversify our exporting destination, and we have to have a close relationship with those top 3 countries. Especially we have a large dependence on the labor, lava and tuna, which shows 26.7% in 2010 and 45% in 2021. So when this kind of item has a situation, it can affect largely to the overall export. So we need to develop and identify next generation exporting item to diversify our export items. We also had structural changes. We had the relay trade and the e-commerce. Due to the COVID-19, we had the reorganization of the supply chain. So this relay trade increased using the Korea. We don't see the specific numbers yet, but we see the increasing trend of the e-commerce. For the sustainable export, the e-commerce and digital trade should be facilitated more. So, according to these changes in the trade environment and the structures, let me give you the new export strategy direction. We need to consider 3 elements. First, we have to have the tracking, labor, and environment and history. And we also need to have the risk management, such as exchange rate and oil price and food safety. And we also need to diversify our competitiveness with the more countries to export and the more products to export. So first, we need to proactively respond to the international rules. We need to have the traceability in the labor environment, and especially environment is very important element, since in the past it was not related directly into the trade. However, recently the marine pollution and the marine mammals protection can be an important factor to consider in the fisheries export. U.S. also announced a ban on the products which undermine the ocean environment. Next, we also need a risk management and response. So IMF reported this October that the economic growth rate will go down from 3.2 to 2.7 next year. So all the media is expect high inflation and economic recession. So we need to come up with the countermeasures to respond to these external environmental changes. We need to proactively develop the market. We have a RCEP and the IPEF, and also we are considering the joining of the CPTPP. So we have the strong labor standards and the environmental standards. So to be prepared, we need to join this kind of membership. Next, we have to secure the safety of the seafood. This is a must, not the option. Due to the increase in the income, the safety is highly required by the consumers. So regarding this, we need to have the monitoring process and the preemptive countermeasures, especially for the labor, which is a major export item of Korea. We need to come up with the standards or the more preemptive position for that. From the production to the export, we need to have a whole process tracking system. So that was traceability was applied to only for the domestic circulation. However, it should be expanded to the export item too. Lastly, we need to strengthen the competitiveness of seafood export. We have to diversify our exporting destination and export items. We can say that the number of the countries for the export increased up to 145, but the total exporting countries are the 225, so we have more room to improve. And we are relatively not active compared to the other markets, especially for the Latin America. So we need to establish the strategy to go into that area. And also we need a discovery of the new export items. Due to the subsidy, we cannot export the fisheries we caught in the natural environment. So we need to focus on the aquaculture production, and the price is going up after COVID-19. So based on the aquaculture, we need to have a more processing, and we have to identify the customized items for the export. We also need to facilitate the digital trade and e-commerce. Digital trade has not grown that fast, but the speed is very that high, but the speed is very fast. So the world will go into the direction of the digital trade. So we need to come up with the countermeasure for strengthening the digital trade. We also have the intermediary trade, like we do the processing here and we add the value into the item so that we can strengthen our competitiveness for the intermediary trade. Thank you for listening.
네, 한국의 수산물 공급망 변화.
Thank you very much. The speaker told us a new perspective on the export strategy of Korea. Now we are going to take a 10-minute break. From 4:30, we are going to have a chance to listen to the last presentation. We are serving snacks in the back of the room, so I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
네, 현재 마지막 발표자 현지 사정으로 인해서 방송통신이 원활하지 않다 보니 조금 시간이 더 지연이 될 것 같습니다. 한 5분에서 10분 정도만 조금 휴식을 더 가지시고 다시 시작하도록 하겠습니다.
Due to the technical issues in the overseas for the fourth presentation, so there will be some delay in the schedule. Please understand.
현재 마지막 발표자 현지 사정으로 인해서
For your information, due to the technical issue, the fourth speaker cannot join us via online, so we will move straight into the panel discussion.
토론 시작에 앞서서 한 번 더 안내.
Before moving into the panel discussion, let me announce that we have a simultaneous interpretation in Korean and in English. So online participants can select your language. And also you can leave the comments in the chat room of the YouTube channels. And for the comments, we will provide a gift after the rafflings. From now on, we will start the discussion for the seeking strategies for responding to seafood exporters amid changes in the global trade environment and accelerating supply chain reorganization. Let me introduce the moderator, who is the Chung Myung-seng, the chairman of ISTF. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm so delighted to have this 15th International Seafood Trade Forum in 2022. And I'd like to thank all the participants and the speakers and the panel discussants for your participation. Recently, not only Korea, but also other countries having difficulties in the global trade environment. Already speakers talked about this. The situation is not favorable for the seafood trade. Among these situations, the global trade environment is changing and supply chain is reorganized. So how to respond to these challenges will be discussed in this discussion, which is very opportune to have a discussion at this moment. We were supposed to have a four-topic presentation, but due to the technical issues, the Mr. Gild Hookstar cannot join yet. So we finished the three presentations. So then let me proceed the discussion, general discussion. So we listened to the three presentation. The presentation by Matthew Tan. He talked about sustainable fisheries and the restoring of the blue economy. And also Mr. Marcio Castro de Souza from the FAO talked about global fish supply chain after COVID-19. And also Mr. Lee Sang-gon from KMI talked about the new export strategy after change in the supply chain. And we cannot connect to him, but the professor, the economic researcher, the Gerd Hoekstra, was supposed to talk about the EU's fish supply chain after the climate change and the carbon neutrality. So he was supposed to provide the detailed information about this. Then without him, we should proceed the panel discussion. We have around an hour. So we have a 6 discussants. For each of you, we cannot give you enough time, so I will give you 5 minutes for each discussant. So please make your points within 5 minutes. And before that, I will introduce each discussant. First, we have Sung-hee Kim, the director of the Export Processing Promotion Division of the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. And then we also have Mr. Kim Ho-dong, the deputy president of Export Department in the Korea Fishery Trade Association. And through web, the Mr. Johan Kvalheim, director of the Norwegian Seafood Council, is joining discussion through the online. We also have the Professor Arthon from Patanapak from Bangkok University. Professor Bongtae Kim from Pyogyong National University. And CEO Youngchan Kim of Bounty Farm. And all the speakers are joining the discussion too. I expect the wonderful comments from you, but please note that you have a limited time of 5 minutes. So then I will give you the order of the discussion first. So Ho-dong Kim, who has the highest relationship for the fishery export. Then Professor Anton from the Bangkok, and then the Youngchan Kim will be the third discussant, and the Bongtae Kim will be fourth, and Mr. Johan Kvalheim, director of the NSC, will be the fifth discussant, and lastly, Sung-hee Kim from the Ministry of the Ocean Fisheries will wrap up the discussion. Then we will start from Ho-dong Kim, the Deputy President of the Korea Fishery Trade Association.
Hello, everyone. As you introduced, I'm Ho-dong Kim. I'm Deputy President of Korea Fishery Trade Association. We heard from Mr. Sang-gun Lee from KEMI, and he emphasized the importance of exploring new export market and export products. Regarding new products, I'd like to suggest pet food. In 2016, it was about $100 million, and it increased every year by 11.6%. And pet food, the world market for pet food was $99.1 billion. And by 2024, it will increase to $140. According to some statistics, export of pet food in 2017 was about $656 billion. My point here is we are seeing an increase in a single house and the population is aging. So we are seeing a new trend in the pet food industry. There's a new term called pet humanization. Many people are caring and raising pet animals. So there is a growing demand for pet food, high-end pet food specifically, and people are looking for tailored pet food that can be specific to their pets. So even functional pet food is introduced to the market. And international pet food producers are manufacturing some pet food that can be even available or edible for human consumption. Many people are treating their pets as humans or their companion, and they are not saving money or they are spending enough money on buying pet food for their pets. So depending on the age and the breed of pets, we may be able to develop pet food, and depending on the health of the pets and depending on the illness or diseases of the pets, we can develop functional pet food. And there is a growing demand for them. I don't have a pet, but most of people have dogs and cats as their pets, and they suffer from diabetes and high blood pressures like human beings. Against this backdrop, Korea is rich in algae, so algae can be used to produce functional pet food for pets suffering from diabetes and high blood pressure. We may have to increase our R&D investment in this area, and we may be able to work with research centers and research institutes to develop this new market. So there is this opportunity to create a new market for pet food, especially functional pet food is giving us a new opportunity, especially in ASEAN, and it will set us apart from other ASEAN countries in the competition. And one example is CO9. CO means salt, and 9 means nothing in Japanese. And the product is created out of algae, and this is a functional pet food ingredient. It can help you extract salt out of your body. And salinity, they purposely increase the salinity in the product. They use this measure, and the device indicates that the salinity is like a 20 or 30, and they also show that when it is dissolved in water, the level of salinity goes down. And they demonstrated this to show that their functional product is good enough both for humans and pets. And this is one example I can give you. Thank you very much for your remark. I have long thought about that idea. The pet food market, I guess it will increase. It will always be bigger than now, and the pet food market is a high-end market. So I would even call it a blue ocean market. So thank you very much for your remark. As I said earlier, next we will hear from Professor Aton Prof. Paktanak from Bangkok University.
Good afternoon, everyone. So what I would present about the demand side of the customers. This is the data that I get from all about 5 years in research that we have done a case study on supply chain management of the seafood and how to apply. So opportunity for Thai seafood supply chain through COVID-19 and economical crisis that we're facing because of pandemic. At the moment, some people mention that we are after COVID, but actually we are during COVID pandemic-19 because it's still on and on. Maybe it's COVID-22 already. So it's going to be COVID-23 by next year because it's involved in several things. So Thailand used to be positioned ourselves as kitchen of the world. We're supplying 70% of our seafood out of the country because, you know, as you mentioned, we are a developing country and we are producing the goods and we're just eating, you know, the seafood domestically by ourselves, or just only 30%. That's the data by 2019. And now it's a little bit, now after COVID, it's getting a little bit more of the domestic consumption, but it's about 5 or to 10% increasing. So we have to change the strategy of Thai exporting strategy. And again, you know, same as ASEAN country as exporter on post-COVID, we have to increasing to focus on more regional, that we are focused on rather than export to European country, to America. So we have to consider by ourselves now that in our own area, ASEAN country, or even in Thailand ourselves. And then this is the impact of Thai exporting. So we have big order into April 2020. We have big, because everyone was panic about the COVID-19 and thought, yeah, people will not get locked down and they have to stay home. So now they stock up, all the canned tuna, surimi products. So as you see, all the canned tuna have increased their value by 30% of the order. So those days, all the Thai packer, or the Thai seafood, or the Thai tuna processor, they're rushing all the fish to come to Thailand and processing at beginning of the 2020. But later on, we found that frozen seafood product have been decreasing because of logistic reason. The freight getting canceled, the ship have been canceled, and then also the logistic wise, because of frozen product, you have to freeze them and have to control temperature for the whole supply chain. But surprisingly, the surimi item is easier to keep, or the crab stick, or the imitation crab have been increasing by 5%. That is the data that we compare between 2019 and 2020. And then this is the conclusion: the tuna has gone up, frozen seafood gone down, surimi has gone down. So that time, all the nobody knows exactly what they have to do. All the retailer, supermarket, they try to stock up as much as they can, or sometimes they said they cancel the order because they have too much stock, because people got locked up, they can't buy the products. So what is the having changed until today? That we've been predict that time in 2019 and in conference, international conference of food, we say in few years time the supply chain will be changed. It's going to be some player in the supply chain is going to disappear. So let me walk you through the supply chain into brief areas. So first we have primary supplier, and then primary supplier is a fisherman, aquaculture, fish farm, and then come to the factories. And then factory, after they produce canned tuna, they produce frozen shrimp or seafood, they ship to their customer, where supermarket, restaurants, and then retail. And then now the retailer got impact. You see, got the red star there. The retailer got impact by they can't sell or they can't communicate with their customer at all because everyone was so panicked until today. So what they do, they impact back because the order getting less from processor and distributor, and then the order get less from the supplier as well. So that's why everyone's get really panicked. They don't know what to do. This is a really new experience for them. This is traditional supply chain that I published on 2019, which you have fishing boat, aquaculture, fish traders in the fish market here. And then we have hypermarket, we have seafood processor to export out, because our main bread and butter is about exporting country rather than local customer. And then later on, we have change happening in logistically, because everyone gone, the freight have been very expensive because they cancel some routes. And they need to quarantine, cancel orders, and then shipping strategy we have to pack, sometimes the product have to pack smaller in cheaper price. And then the size of the product needs to be smaller in order to attract the customer, because everyone's so, to be blunt, everyone's so broke, they get panic of their spending. Until today, everyone goes really panic their spending. People seem to come out more and spend more money, but they are really panicked because they feel uncertainty. And then plus of that, and on the top of that, we now have the war between Russia and Ukraine, and certain oil pricing were expensive. So people had rather save the money to spend on seafood, because seafood seemed to be a very expensive product, and then they kind of feel their stomach. So now the fish market had disappeared because of COVID-19. And fish market had disappeared, and then we have the trader, processor, and we have the new emerge. This is the reprocessor. Reprocessor is the one who import the product to Thailand to process the product, which is very short off. For example, squid they import from South America, and then they just give to the market. And also the traders, well, the traders are the one who prepare the product for the chef. Maybe they give the product for a chef, and they're also importers. So they act as importer or material sourcing agents for the whole supply chain. Okay, so this is reported by 2002 this is just this year that we're reporting. This is updated the supply chain, how it looked for Thailand. And then to my conclusion, because for the COVID, what we have to do, we have to focus on regional or that domestic, like Thailand have to sell to Myanmar, Thailand have to sell to Vietnam, Thailand need to sell the product or import the product from Malaysia. And then later on become a regional supply, we have to look after ourselves properly, how to adding value within the country. And then for the entrepreneur or for the business, we have to be adaptive business model. You have to be able to survive to industry, and later on, yeah, everyone have to survive. That's how you have to keep yourself into the supply chain. Thank you very much.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you for your presentation. The professor from Patanapak prepared a lot. He talked about the Thailand supply chain and also the future direction of the Thailand fisheries. Thank you very much for your presentation. Next, I will invite Young-Chan Kim, the CEO of the Bounty Farm.
네, 안녕하세요.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the founder and CEO of Bounty Farm. My name is Kim Young-chan. In the fishery industry, we are pursuing digitalization. I would like to give you a brief overview of the digitalization trend in the industry. Before doing that, I'd like to introduce you my company. We are providing a platform that basically develops an ecosystem for the industry. We started with frozen products. And we are also trading some energy sources, including coal. The previous speakers made great points. In the fishery industries, we are seeing two biggest trends. One is climate change impact. And there is this concern that whether we are technologically ready to cope with climate change impacts. And personally, I think there will be an increasing demand for animal protein in countries. And as you know, fishery products are biggest sources of animal protein. But there is this gap between supply and demand for protein obtained from the fishery products. So what are our solutions? I can suggest two solutions. One is risk management solution. As the first speaker, Matthew, said, in order to increase production of aquaculture, we have to manage risks. If we can do a good job at managing risks, we can have enough fishery products from aquaculture. If there is a good match between international buyers and international sellers, that will help the current trend. And it would be nice to have an off-take agreement. And I think those two solutions will help us mitigate the challenges facing us. So my company, Bounty Farm, is working on how we can make as many agreements as possible. The fishery industry is a traditional industry. Not just the fishery industries, all commodity industries are traditional and conventional industries. Instead of searching new ideas, just like in the e-commerce industry, exporters and importers, they never fail to import or export because they don't know each other. It's not important that we have a list of exporters and importers available. What is important is if you want to export your products, you need to have a reliable business network so that you are assured that you can export or import fishery products. If you do that offline, it is very labor intensive. Compared to golf, you have to shot 10 balls to get just one shot right. You have to try 10 balls to get one shot right. So we'd like to find the best option for good match between sellers and buyers, and my platform can help it. The platform has 2 million data sources. Let's say you own a fishery restaurant, and you can come to our platform to look for a match in the network. You can look for your importer or exporter in my platform. So we are basically providing an enhanced platform for sellers and buyers of fishery products. And we will get this platform ready and launch this platform by the end of this month. So we will take advantage of existing infrastructure to provide a better match between sellers and buyers and between exporters and importers. I think this will help solve the biggest challenges facing the industry. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you very much for your comment. The buzzword in the fishery industry is aquaculture, and many people are forecasting aquaculture may be our future. Another buzzword is our response to climate change. Another buzzword is digitalization, as you pointed out in your comment. Without digitalization, we cannot move toward a new world, and digitalization, I believe, will accelerate international trade of the fishery products. And I will look forward to your activities.
님께
Next, the microphone is going to Professor Bong-tae Kim from the Bugyeong National University. I am doing the research about the fisheries trade. Thank you for your invitations. APAC and FAO expert gave us the presentation, and listening to them, I thought the export is very important for Korean fisheries, but doing exports right will contribute to the global food security. So in the global perspective, we had to think about the fisheries in Korea. Recently, I had the research with the KMI, so let me talk about it. When there was a change in the fishery export, there were several factors, and we drew it as the model. So whether the exports is changing depending on the competitiveness or the other external factors. So the global demand is increasing continuously, but when we had the global financial crisis, it came down. And also recently, during the 2020, due to the COVID-19, the export also decreased. So comparing these two situations, it was around 6% in the global crisis and the 7% during the COVID-19. So COVID-19 had a bigger impact, which giving the higher impact on the export. The other factors were in the advanced countries like Chile and other countries had some the decreased export, but Korea rather had an increased export even during the global financial crisis. That was the competitiveness of the Korea. But in 2020, during the COVID-19, the Korean export and the other export showed a decreased competitiveness, and the middle income and the low income countries such as India and Vietnam had the increased export. Compared to the global crisis, Korea showed a much less competitiveness during the COVID-19. We need a more thorough analysis about it, but I believe that the short-term shock was very big. And also due to the structures of the export, which is focusing on the small number of items and small number of countries, can be a factor for that. However, that we see the recovery in the exports, maybe we need another assessment for that. So when we assess the overall factors, it will be helpful for Korea to set up the new export strategy. All were already mentioned by the speakers. The international rules are changing continuously, so that these kind of international rules and norms and institutions will be the big competitiveness for Korea. The environmental standards is coming out continuously, and now we are trying to adopt the border carbon tax and the carbon emission tax. So when that happens, it will influence the Korea's export. Then the aquaculture will be very important then, so we need to be prepared for that. The tariff barriers is disappearing continuously due to the FTA, but we have other factors. So for the mega FTA, we need to use the protection of the origins so that we can protect our own production. So we are joining the CTTPT. It can give the negative impact, but if we can use this in a more active way, maybe we can find a way to help the Korean fishery exports. Thank you. Professor Kim is conducting research with the KMI about the variables in the Korean fishery export. So climate change and international rules should be given the attention from the people to respond to the changes in trade environment. So you've waited for a long time, Mr. Johan Kovalheim, so I will hand over the microphone to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, the Korean Maritime Institute, for inviting me to this event, and congratulations with your 15 forum. I'm going to be very short. I only have 5 minutes, so I will start immediately by a short introduction of the Norwegian Seafood Council that was established in 1991. It's owned by the Ministry of Fisheries, but it's entirely financed by the seafood industry in Norway through an export levy. But we work in Korea as a Team Norway together with the Royal Norwegian Embassy and also Innovation Norway. And then here in Korea, we have 2 partners working both with retail, also with the PR. For our activities in the Korean market, and also not only Korean market, but in the 13 markets where we have an office, we work within marketing, market insight, market access, communication, and PR. And that is, of course, not only an advantage for the Norwegian seafood exporters. Our aim and our mission is for sure to increase the seafood consumption, not only about Norwegian seafood, but also increasing the seafood consumption in each of the markets where we are. So we see a general trend that, of course, the seafood consumption is struggling, and our mission is really to make sure that we get more seafood consumers in, more consumers to eat healthy seafood also for the future. And just to give you a short example of what we do of the marketing in Korea, we do marketing in the stores, we do digital marketing, we try to reach the new consumers, the consumers in new ways of communication platforms. We use digital, we go e-commerce, we go in the traditional offline stores. So we are everywhere where the consumers are buying their fish. In addition, we do weekly and monthly and daily statistics on the seafood, so that not only about Norwegian export, but also about what's going on in the different markets, so that we share with the industry, both Koreans and Norwegians and also worldwide, because our mission is that the more information we have all together, the better we can analyze the market and the better we can obtain better results in the market in terms of growing the seafood consumption. In addition, of course, to all the statistics, we also work with the PR. And PR communication, we make sure that we have attention in the media about the seafood, mainly positive stories. This is about building the trust for the seafood industry in general, making sure that the consumers in the market also have a trust in what they get from the sea. And that is why we work from Norwegian side very hard on communicating on what is Norway doing on the seafood safety side. Yes, and of course you have mentioned it before also, sustainability. What is sustainability? For us, it's about making sure that we work together in the social aspect, the economical and the environmental aspect. And just to give you some highlights, you have also earlier today mentioned the technology that is bringing us forward, increasing the awareness and understanding how to do farming and how to do fisheries more efficient, and also in terms of sustainability. And just, I heard also mentioning here earlier about the subsidization of the industry. Norwegian seafood industry has been without any subsidization since the 1980s. And actually, it was on the moment when we removed the subsidization that the industry actually started to make money through a very hard process of being more efficient, but it made us more profitable. And now they have many markets to where we export our seafood, more than 150 markets. The main species in terms of value is, of course, the Norwegian salmon. That is 70% of our export value, 42% of the volume year to date. But we have many other species also. And for Korea, of course, it's not only about the salmon, it's also the Norwegian mackerel, and it's also about the king crab. And what is Korea for the Norwegians? Well, Korea is actually our 11th largest market in 2021. And that is just behind Japan, but I'm sure with the growth that you're doing now in Korea, the growth we see among the retailers and the demand for Norwegian seafood and mackerel, I'm sure that very soon South Korea will definitely pass Japan as the biggest market. Poland and Denmark, here you see they're more processing. They're processing our seafood and transporting it to other markets around the world. So Korea for us is the number one market in direct export of mackerel. It's the number one market for fresh, alive king crab, and it's the 11th largest market for Norwegian fresh salmon. So, of course, with this in mind and with this current situation about the logistics, there has been challenges this year because all the fresh salmon that we are transporting from Norway to Korea is by air, and when the Russian territory has been closed, we have to fly around either south of Russia or over the North Pole, which has led, of course, to a much higher transport cost, which has then, of course, had an impact also on the volume. But that impact has now changed and prices are getting up again and the consumption is coming back. This is just to show you what kind of products we are sending to Korea. The tremendous growth from 2020, when the pandemic came, to 2021, we had a 30% growth in volume and in value to Korea, and mainly salmon and mackerel are the drivers. So with us, of course, we are united under one brand, one mark, saying that when you are sourcing sustainable seafood, the easiest way for you as a consumer to do it is start look for the seafood from Norway mark, because that is definitely showing you that the origin is in place and that the fish is originating from the country where we have very strict rules and very high focus on food safety. So with that, thank you very much.
예, 좋은 말씀 감사합니다.
Thank you for your wonderful comments. NSC is actively working for the fisheries consumption, seafood consumption. After COVID-19, he talked about the changes in the supply chain in the salmon, mackerel, and king crab, which are the very important items for Korean market too. So lastly, we have Sung-hee Kim from the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries for the wrapping up the panel discussion. Hello, nice to meet you all. I am the Director of Export and Processing Promotion Division in Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. So I'd like to thank the three speakers who provided wonderful presentations. Particularly, due to the global warming, when the sea temperature goes up by 5 Celsius degree within 100 years, 2/3 of the fishes will be extinct. That was a very shocking news. That is the testament that our fishery resources will disappear soon. In order to respond to that, we need to think about the sustainable fisheries, which is aquaculture, and the Korean government is working hard to boost the aquaculture sector continuously. And also Mr. Sang-gun Lee from KMI talked about MMP, all the regulations, and Japanese Fisheries Optimization Act, and other strengthened regulations, and the impact into the stability and the competitiveness of the fisheries export. So for that, the Korean government is working hard to provide a safe seafood across the world. And the public trust in the safety of seafood is going down because of the marine pollution. So Korean government put the emphasis safety of the seafood before the amount of the exports of the seafood. So all the public and private sector and academias are working hard. Like salmon in the Norway, Korea has lava. So we try to make the seaweed lava just like the salmon from the Norwegia as the K level. So we will make it as the star product for Korea, and tuna and oyster will be also the major item for exports from the Korea. So I hope that the Korean seafood can attract the palate of the world in the future. And our Korean government will work hard to make it possible. Thank you. So Sung-hee Kim, director, is in charge of export policy of Korea. And he also mentioned that his strong will to grow the export and the export item, discover export items. So we finished all the panel discussion, but we have questions coming from the online, and also we have attendees who physically are joining this event. So we will receive the question from them, And after that, we will try to connect the Guild Hoekstra from the Netherlands again. So the questions are coming from the online participants. The first question goes to the Mr. Matthew Tan from APEC PPFS. For the sustainable development resources, what is the priority of the public-private partnerships? So do you have any thoughts and ideas? So Matthew?
APEC PPFS, we have agreed upon is that the use of technology. Now we reckon that the world is getting warmer. You've seen in my presentation. It is something that we cannot deny. Our agricultural farmers in APEC are suffering. And what we have done within APEC now is that we have set up APEC centers where we have about more than 10 universities, in all relating to agriculture and aquaculture. The centers were set up, and we now have like an intranet network where we talk among ourselves and we discuss the problem statement that our farmers is facing. And within the APEC center, we look for a technology solution within the 10 centers that is within us. So we are strongly supporting all our farmers, especially small farmers, women farmers, that it's a priority for APEC. We are looking at supporting them, and we want to make technology affordable. So we do have a platform where we share best practices. We share technology that we validated, in our APEC center before we share the project, to the various economies. So for APEC, the use of technology is a must. We can no longer ignore that. You can't do farming like what you did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because the climate has changed. The climate has changed so tremendously that many of the small farmers, they are suffering. So APEC has recognized that, and so with that, we have launched an APEC center to support our farmers. So we do have a platform that we share, and I'm happy to share this platform, to technology providers, solution providers. We have agreed that this platform will not be exclusive. It will be all inclusive. Even members economies that are not part of the APEC ecosystem, we welcome them to be part of it. Over to you.
Thank you. 예, 감사합니다.
Thank you for your answer. So APEC's PPFS is trying to share as many technologies as possible so that it can support many farmers. Thank you very much for your answer. So I'd like to open up the floor to take a couple of questions from the audience. Do you have any questions? Please raise your hand if you have a question and tell us a little bit about yourself before asking your question. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Ki-ok Han. I'm a senior researcher from the KMI. My question goes to Mr. Young-Chang Kim. You introduced us your business idea. And I think your business idea will help increase everyone's welfare and well-being. I think it will also help Korean exporters. My question is, even if we have an excellent AI algorithm, without extensive database, the AI algorithm will be in no use, or we cannot take the most out of the algorithm. So database, I think it should come first, even before the AI algorithm. If I understand correctly, you are going to provide more than 2 million data sources. Does that mean that your platform is a matching platform between exporters and importers, or do you have to collect and recruit more exporters and importers for your platform. I think your question is relatively long, so I'd like to answer one by one. Yes, basically, we have about 2 million data sources, and we have about 60 business keywords out of the data sources. I'm not saying those keywords that are the most important things. What is important is the interaction between the keywords. I will call it rating. And it is also important to note that how the database sources will work between users. I mean, how to explore the best possible business opportunities is our focus. That's all our technology is about. It took quite long to collect all the database sources. We needed some investment. So in early days, we had a couple of pivots. And we also tried data scraping, and we also used some manuals. And we obtained some aggregated data out of different sources. We wanted to create an overarching platform, so we scripted extensive, massive amount of data sources. So it took about 2 years for us to try this platform and to collect these data sources. I'm not saying we are collecting data sources from specific or particular sources. You may think it is easy to trade this offline, and we are taking orders of 3 trillion Korean won in some sectors of the industry. We are trying to pinpoint which is the best business sector. I'm not saying my platform is perfect, but I can at least say this is version 1 of the platform we are trying to create. Thank you very much for your answer. So we had a panel discussion, and I'd like to wrap up the discussion session here. And I'd like to want to have a chance to listen from the fourth speaker. Let me try connecting him. I apologize again for the technical issue.
So hello everyone. Could you hear me this time? Okay, I see some people nodding in the room, so thanks a lot. And first of all, I apologize for the bad connection with my microphone this morning. It's an honor and pleasure to be invited by your 15th conference as Korean Maritime Institute. My name is Geert Hoekstra from the Netherlands, from the Wageningen University and Research. And today I want to share some few thoughts about restructuring of the EU supply chain due to climate change and carbon neutrality. So first of all, I'm an economist fisheries and seafood markets, and I conduct analysis based on import-export data from the EU. We analyze seafood markets and value chain analysis. We also look at circularity from Wageningen University, also from food technology background. And in the end, I'm also involved in educational programs, how to develop new ways to educate our new aquaculture professionals and fishers for the nearby future. So the mission of Wageningen is to explore the potential of nature to improve quality of life. So this is our campus based in Wageningen. You see different buildings. There are also companies based on the campus. like Unilever and FrieslandCampina, famous dairy company in the Netherlands, also stationed in China. So we have a lot of research institutes here located, combined with business. So Wageningen is holding a strong position in the agricultural field of universities. For instance, in the Taiwan University ranking, we are number 2 in the left bottom. In the right bottom, you see also the Taiwan ranking, and then we are number 1 in the national for plant sciences, animal sciences. To have a better understanding of the university, we do have the university, that's one side, and we do have the research departments. So they are doing the applied research as the university is doing the more fundamental research. So the green square, that is the university side with all the departments, and the light blue square, those are the applied research departments. And you see the square, the red square, that is my institute, that's the economic applied research within Wageningen. So if we look at the EU, and this is a figure from the FAO, so from the colleagues of Mr. Castro da Souza, we see that the EU is highly dependent on imports. And actually, Asia is the world's largest supplier to the EU with 12%. So those are familiar figures for you all. And if we look at the EU, there's a strategy called the Green Deal that is very ambitious, but the idea behind this to make also the seafood sector, but a lot of other sectors, climate neutral in their emissions. So if you look at the objectives of that Green Deal, it's about improving the well-being of people, but also making Europe more climate neutral and protecting our natural habitat. So I really liked the 3 circles that Mr. Kalfheim used, like the economic, the social, but also the ecological. And I think we have to look at how to produce within planetary boundaries. That's also the main message behind the Green Deal. So to become climate neutral by 2050, but also to protect our resources in human life. So I did a small desk study about how many policy regulations are implemented between 2016 and 2022. And if you see already, this is not everything, but this is, let's say, a list of the implemented policy of the last years. Yeah, it's impressive. And one I would like to highlight is the regulation Fit for 55. It's the third one. And it states that the EU needs to reduce their carbon emissions by 55% in the year 2030 compared with 1990. So this is already let's say an ambitious goal that is also nearby future if we're talking about 2030. Another one is the biodiversity strategy as component of the EU Green Deal, and it states that we need to go to 30% of all products needs to be organic. So the organic sector is growing very fastly if we want to achieve this goal of the EU Green Deal. Now, the last slide, this one, those were policy regulations. If we see specifically on climate change, there are also many implementations and regulations already. So differing from the year of 2016, until this year, 2022. And what I've understood from the debate and also from the panel discussion, I think we could expect more and more regulations towards more sustainable seafood regulations. So today I want to highlight some insights from a study we've done in the EU with different universities. You see all the logos of the involved universities on the right side at the bottom. And it was about the post-harvest activities in the value chains of seafood, so fisheries and aquaculture in the EU, to see what the effects of climate change are and how to become more resilient. And I have to stress that's about post-harvest. So we did ignore the landings by fisheries and the harvest of aquaculture. But in the end, of course, you need a full understanding of the entire supply chain and value chain to stress the post-harvest effects. So there were 3 tasks in this study. And I have to mention that this study is almost finished. It will be published in, I think, 3 or 4 weeks by DG Mare, so the department of the European Commission that conducts or that advises the policy for the fisheries and aquaculture. There were 3 tasks. The first task was what about the financial and physical resilience of post-harvest value chains in relation to climate change. Task 2, the impact of structure from EU post-harvest value chains on greenhouse gas emissions. So GHG is the abbreviation of greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, task 3, technical evolutions and industrial strategies for improving energy efficiency. So that's more a technical perspective. And we choose 23 case studies, and that means 22 different species. So from cultivated sea bream, from Greece, until tarbot or salmon from Norway, but also wild capture fisheries like scallops, shellfish, flatfish, roundfish, etc. So a whole spectrum of different species in the EU seafood market, even fish meal and algae. So first of all, we did a literature review, and we found that there were not that much insights from the literature about the effects of climate change on post-harvest. Mainly it was about the wild capture fishery and aquaculture. And if we see what the effects are in the post-harvest sector, we do see that there is a change in supply of raw material, and that is due to traditional species moving to other waters. So by rising water temperature, we see a lot of fish species are moving more into the waters of Iceland, let's say the Norwegian countries, Scandinavia. So that is one effect of climate change. Another one is that we do see new species coming into the EU waters. So for instance, in the Mediterranean, we only have the tuna species and, for instance, lionfish. And now it's even coming up more northwards. So we do see in coastal waters of France, the Netherlands, Germany, we do see more tuna familiar species. You see red mullets. We see more squid. Those kind of species are also an opportunity for the local markets. There's also change in seasonal fluctuations. And in the end, we do see more flooding, heat waves. That was also the first presenter. And extreme colds. And that's increasing, of course, energy costs for storage and cooling the fish products, and serious repercussions in transport and thermal processing. So what are those greenhouse gas hotspots? And we do see, in particular for the packaging material, we see a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. if we look at life cycle analysis, so LCAs, we do see it in terminal processing, high emission transport, in particular by plane. We do see a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, and long-term frozen storage, resulting in also higher energy costs since the Ukraine and Russian war. So those processes are sensitive to CO2 pricing, and it requires alternative technologies, processing, or materials to reduce those costs. Now, if you look at the resilience, so that was the main question of task one, what could we recommend to the EU Commission and to the companies? So climate change is not immediate focus for the majority of consulted companies. So they say it's a long-term discussion, but not on our focus for the short term. However, they are highly reliant on fossil fuels and also the tax impacts on that. So we see the gas prices, the energy prices. Another one is there's an increase in imports versus local land fish by fisheries. Yeah, so the EU is not that self-sufficient. Only 31% of the EU is coming from their own production. The rest is imported. The buzzword this morning and this afternoon was aquaculture. I think that's also true for the EU. So if they want to be more resilient, they have to diversify to other species. We import already a lot of salmon from Norway and from Scotland. And I think there will be more and more species cultivated in third countries that will be imported by the EU. As I mentioned, there are also upcoming species in coastal waters like squid, red mullet, and tuna. So that's for the local markets an opportunity. And if you're talking about the circular economy, we could better upgrade and valorize rest streams of processed products, like using the mince, the shrimp chitting for human consumption, followed by liter of fish skin, cosmetics, and supplements. Other recommendations are more making use of plant-based feeds in fish farming. So if we could feed the cultivated fish with more planetary-based feeds, that would be reduce the energy costs and also the resilience will thereby increase. Mr. Tan already emphasized the opportunities and the potential of INTA, so integrated multi-trophic agriculture, also to reduce environmental costs and the use of fish meal. Carbon fixation by algae to reduce the carbon footprint. Inland aquaculture, because we have a better control of the circumstances, like if we get more floods in the coastal waters and heat waves. And investments into renewable energies like solar panels and also the truck transport, more by electrification. So what could the EU Commission do, like the role of management? They could introduce new species to the market. However, it's not always that easy. For instance, we have heard from the retailers and the HoReCa companies that we interviewed that it needs a really good understanding the biomass and let's say the supply side. If you have a lot of fluctuations in seasonality between species, it's not that easy to have, for instance, the same stability as we have with salmon from Norway or with the sea bream from Greece, Spain, and Turkey. So that is important. And also, it's also necessary to get your customers, your consumers in store, be familiar with the taste of the new species by let them try these new products. So if we look at the outcomes of greenhouse gas emissions analysis, products are increasingly prepackaged, and that's a kind of paradox because we need to use less plastics in our production, but we've heard from the retailers, the supermarkets in the EU, that they say for a better shelf lifetime, you need those plastics. So that is kind of paradoxical. The availability of some products are regional traded, so others are transported over large distance. That's also what Mr. Castro da Souza told us, that we have long value chains and supply chains in the fisheries and seafood markets. So that is something we could look at. And we still are relying on a lot of airplane transport. That's also something that is, that maybe could be improved by shipping or by other ways of transport. Energy consumption is a large hotspot. For instance, if you have more the retail packaging, like the fillets with battering or with frozen, that needs a lot of energy consumption. So these are a few examples of greenhouse gas emissions in the seafood chains that are becoming hotspots and also maybe be priced by the carbon emissions. So actually, those are the hotspots, as I already mentioned. So long distance transport of long-term frozen storage. And actually, by all day, these hotspots, the costs are increasing, in particular due to the Ukraine-Russian war and the demand for energy. So I want to go to a wrap up. If we look at the local supply and consumption, is it in balance? Actually, we do see mostly a mismatch between what is locally produced and what is demanded. So that is one of the recommendations for the EU Commission, how to stimulate more local consumption. And yeah, we do also see that several species are produced in other parts of or other regions of Europe and internationally. And yeah, if you could better manage local and local demand and local supply with each other, it will enhance the reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions within the seafood. So those are several species that we highlighted in the 23 case studies. And this is a general message overall in the case studies. So this is my last slide. So we also discussed with many companies in the EU, like large seafood producers and also middle-sized companies, how we can identify potential greenhouse gas emissions and reduction strategies. They came up with different strategies, like installations of small solar panels. They have a lot of rooftops without solar panels so far. So that is one way how we can more make use of renewable energy. However, you need an infrastructure that is ready for it. We do see if you generate solar energy, sometimes it's not transformed into energy because of lack of capacity in the infrastructure. So that needs a better improvement. Exchanging residual heat from other industries at industry part level, and also alternative high value application of processing residues, so maximum use of co-products. That is the circularity message, like make more use of the rest streams and also reducing your raw materials. So that was my presentation. Thanks again for the invitation, and hopefully it was a fruitful forum with each other. Thanks a lot.
네, 기후
So related to climate change, he talked about the EU's seafood policy. Thank you for your presentation. So with that, we can conclude all the presentation and discussion for the 15th International Seafood Trade Forum. Then I will ask Mr. Chung for the final comments. So thank you very much for your final presentation. I'd like to ask your understanding for the technical glitch in the middle of the event. So we had all the presentations and discussions, and the participants also gave us a very valuable questions, which shows the interest and the affection about the seafood industry and problem. So it's been 3 years. We are doing this conference continuously during the COVID-19. So I hope that we can get together in person when the COVID is totally over. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for your participation. I wish all the best for all of you. Thank you very much. And we also the missing people in the group photo last time. So I'd like to ask all the participants come forward to have the group photo together.